That's actually really cool looking. I actually really like that a lot. Wow. 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 I'm quite satisfied. That's really dope. And I'm glad I have a CCS sticker. The first CCS sticker I've had in probably 15 years. I like it a lot. You can either get it just the deck, or you can get a complete. Or you can get it with some hanging hardware, so you could like put it on your wall easily. But yeah, I'm quite happy with this skateboard. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Let's draw some fantastical beasts, some mythological creatures. I'm going to do one from reference and then one from imagination. So I'm working from this book, Monsters, a bestiary of devils, demons, vampires, werewolves, and other magical creatures by Christopher Dell. If I'm like stuck for ideas or can't figure out what to draw, usually I'll pull this bad boy out. I'm gonna link it in the description. My knowledge of mythology is actually pretty limited. It's not that great. Like on Jeopardy, when mythology is a category, I'm always like, I got this. And then it's like, I get the first question, who is Dionysus? But then everyone else is like, who is Persephone? Who is Demeter? Who is... I can't even think of another one right now, like as an example. That's like, I wish I just had like mythology on the top of my mind all the time. Not really though. So my knowledge of mythology is pretty bad. I actually had to look up what this creature was for this video, and apparently it's a harpy. And I did a quick pass on Wikipedia to find out what that is, and it comes originally from Greek mythology. They are wind spirits. There's a forest full of them that tortures people in Dante's Inferno. Apparently the one that I'm working from is from France in the 1700s. I don't know, I just thought it looked cool. I think this is also why my knowledge of mythology is so bad, is because I'm way more of a visual person than an analytical person. So I'm drawn to the symbolic representations of the myths over the actual like content of the stories and like what everything's called and who all the players are. When I have tried to read Edith Hamilton's book on mythology, it's like my brain is a toddler and I'm like trying to shove vegetables in its mouth, like just get in there, and my brain's like no, I don't want mythology in my brain. But then when I look at a picture of it, it's like I'm giving my toddler brain chocolate or something. It's like, yeah, that's the stuff. Fill me up with it. I've been interested in Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell since I was in college. I took a psychology class, and I also took a class that was called Myth and Symbol. And so we talked about Jung and Joseph Campbell a lot in there. The ideas of archetypes, the shadow, and the collective unconscious. I recently discovered this used bookstore by my house, and they're a non-profit bookstore, so all their books are like $2 or $3. So I go in there with boxes and I fill them up. No, I go in there and I'll buy like a book or two and spend $5. So I was in this bookstore and I saw this Carl Jung book, Psyche and Symbol, just sitting there taunting me, just going, come on over. It's been a while, open me up, Parker. And I was like, hey, it's been a while, I guess I'll check this out. Spent the $2 on it, and I gotta say, I was still creatively inspired. Since not everybody is that familiar with Carl Jung, I guess I'll just say a little bit about him. He was an analytical psychologist He worked around the same time that Sigmund Freud did. He studied myths and religions from the past and present, from all over. Comparative mythology, people would probably call it today. He thought it was interesting that all these myths from around the world had similarities in the symbolism in the stories, and he was also a practicing psychotherapist. Many of his patients would tell him their dreams, and he noticed that their dreams had similarities with the myths and religions that he had studied. That led to his idea of the archetype. His model of the psyche was that you have your consciousness on top, and that's like a very narrow area of your personality. Your personal unconscious, which is just stuff that you're not aware of or that you repress because it brings you pain. And then there's this vast area called the collective unconscious, and that's where archetypes live. One of his students called archetypes psychic organs. The way that you can tell that a human being has organs is you can cut open a cadaver and see that it has a heart and a liver and lungs and a spleen. And you can do that to 1 million cadavers and you'll find the same thing. Similarly, archetypes are observed through the manifestation of symbolic imagery. I don't know, I think this stuff's interesting. I find that especially when I'm working from imagination, where I make a mark and see like what jumps out at me from that. I'm kind of like discovering an archetype in a way. And also I've noticed when I have shown my art in public before, a lot of times people go up and they'll go, hey, that one kind of reminds me of, this or that. Have you ever read this, or have you ever seen this movie? And sometimes I have, sometimes I haven't. But when people have come up and said that, it's never consciously, like I didn't do a painting of the thing that they're referring to. It's just like the person who did the thing that they're talking about was just interacting with the same archetypal psychic structures that I was in contact with when I was working. One of the big archetypes that Jung talked about was the shadow, is when an individual comes into contact with some sort of darkness that causes some pain or emotional distress that they weren't prepared for. And so the example, I actually remember I wrote a little paper about this when I went to the Oklahoma City bombing memorial when I was somewhere between 7 and 9. There was a terrorist attack in the 90s. This guy named Timothy McVeigh drove a moving truck full of explosives up to this federal building in downtown Oklahoma City, detonated the explosives, and he did it like right in front of the daycare of the building. So he just killed like a ton of children, just people working in this office building basically. But I remember seeing that when I was a kid, and going back to Jung, my consciousness at the time was, I liked the Dodgers and I got my toys and I like going to school. I didn't like going to school, but my friends are at school and they're pretty cool. And that was like it. And then there was this collision with the collective unconscious, the archetype of the shadow, which is the fact that malevolent people will cause the death and suffering of innocent people. Me and my family went to like an Applebee's afterwards, and I remember just looking at the sports bar stuff on the walls. I had been to an Applebee's before, I remember the sports bar stuff on the wall wasn't the same sports bar stuff as before. I wasn't the same as before. It put me in conflict with my whole model of reality. So that's what Jung would refer to as an encounter with the archetypal shadow. And everybody has those. I'm definitely not saying this is a unique experience that I've had, so I understand something that most people don't. This is no, everybody has an experience like this. That's why it's an archetype. So Jung's idea about that was you can't get rid of the shadow any more than you can get rid of death and dying. It's always going to be there. And so the goal isn't to eliminate the shadow, it's to integrate it into your personality. He had this idea of wholeness, not perfection. My art is an acquired taste in a way. I do some more figurative, mainstream, representational art also, but the type of stuff that I'm doing here is I honestly just get more meaning out of it. It comes more naturally to me, and it's also the art that people are either all about it and really like it and respect it, or they're like, why are you doing this? Well, what do you want me to do? My art is sort of a way to integrate the collective shadow into something that's productive, that people get value out of. Some people kickbox, Some people ride bulls. I was listening to this episode of Draftsman. It's an art podcast, and they had James Gurney on, who's a great resource if you want to learn how to paint. He's got some wonderful books about it, and he has a great YouTube channel about it. They got into some really interesting territory where they were talking about the hierarchy of educating yourself. They broke it down like this. You have principles as the foundation. These are things that you always need to be working on. They're the fundamentals, basically. If you think about it like a pyramid, principles as your foundation. And then you have concepts on top of that, and the concepts relate to the principles. And then on top of that, you have techniques, which are the means by which you employ the concepts in service of the principles. They're talking more about the technical aspects of drawing and painting. So light, form, composition, perspective. And James Gurney brings up a great point, which is more of a philosophical one, which is a big principle that many people skip over when they're learning art is why? Why are you making art? Why do you want to paint a picture? So for me, this whole Jungian shadow archetype thing relates to that in a very fundamental way. So when I was rereading him, I was reminded of that. Anyways, alright, well, maybe get yourself a copy of this Psyche and Symbol or any other Carl Jung book. Get yourself a copy of this Christopher Dell book. Draw yourself some mythological creatures. I wish you all the best. I hope that you have integrated shadows. I hope your personalities are working as a whole. As always, if you found this video valuable, there are many ways that you can support my work at parkerwinans.com. Thank you.